There is a different set of rules for the world when the sun goes down. Most people are asleep, safe in their beds. But for those of us who work the graveyard shift, the gas station clerks, the security guards, the night auditors, we know the truth. We know that when the streets are empty, something else fills the void. Tonight, we have 4 terrifying true stories from the night shift. Stories that will make you think twice about stepping out of your house after midnight. Sit back, turn off the lights, and let's get into it. Story 1. The Man at Pump 4. I was 22 when this happened, working at a Shell station just off the interstate in rural Ohio. It was the kind of job you take when you're in college and desperate for tuition money. The pay was garbage, but the work was easy. 99% of the time, I just sat there on my phone, watching Netflix, occasionally selling a pack of Marlboros or a Red Bull to a trucker. I actually liked the isolation. At least I did until that Tuesday in November. It was a dead night. A heavy rain had started around midnight, turning the parking lot into a black mirror. The only sound was the hum of the slushy machine and the rhythmic drumming of the rain hitting the metal canopy over the pumps. At exactly 2:15 a.m., the sensor triggered. I looked up from my textbook. I expected to see headlights. Usually the sensor trips when a car rolls over the rubber hose, but there was no car. I checked the CCTV monitor that sat on the counter. We had 4 cameras covering the lot. On camera 2, I saw him. A man was standing right next to Pump 4. He hadn't driven up. He hadn't walked from the sidewalk. It was like he had just materialized there. He was wearing a yellow raincoat, the kind construction workers wear with the hood up. But he wasn't pumping gas. He was just standing there, facing the main building, facing me. I squinted at the screen. The camera quality was grainy, standard 2010 security footage, but I could make out his posture. He was rigid, arms down by his sides, perfectly still. The rain was hammering down on him, but he didn't flinch. Weirdo, I muttered to myself. I figured he was a hitchhiker looking for shelter under the canopy. I went back to my book. 5 minutes passed. I looked at the monitor again. He hadn't moved an inch. He was still at Pump 4, staring at the glass booth I was sitting in. I started to get that prickling feeling on the back of my neck. You know the one. The evolutionary alarm bell that tells you something is wrong before your brain figures out why. I stood up and walked to the front window. I couldn't see his face clearly through the rain and the distance, but I could see he was tall, unnaturally tall. I pressed the button for the external intercom. "Can I help you with something, sir?" My voice cracked a little over the loudspeaker. No reaction. He didn't look up at the speaker. He didn't wave. "Sir, you can't loiter at the pumps. If you aren't buying gas, I have to ask you to leave." Nothing. I let go of the button. Okay, screw this, I thought. I wasn't paid enough to confront a crackhead in a rainstorm. I decided to ignore him. If he was still there in 10 minutes, I'd call the non-emergency police line. I sat back down, but I couldn't focus on my book. My eyes kept drifting to the monitor. 2:28 a.m. Still there. 2:35 a.m. Still there. Then, at 2:42 a.m., the motion sensor light above Pump 4 flickered and died. The lot was plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the streetlights from the highway. On the screen, the man was now just a silhouette. And then, he moved. He didn't walk. He didn't run. The movement was jerky, unnatural. He snapped his head to the side, looking toward the dark woods behind the station. Then, he snapped his head back to the camera. He took a step forward, then another. He was walking toward the door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked the magnetic lock on the front door. It was green, locked. I always kept it locked after midnight. Policy. I watched him on the screen as he crossed the lot. He moved with a strange, loping stride, like his legs were too long for his body. As he got closer to the light of the store, I finally saw his face under the hood of the raincoat. I froze. He was smiling, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide. It stretched the skin of his face so tight that his eyes were pulled into slits. And his mouth, it looked dark, like he had no teeth, just a gaping black maw. He walked right up to the double glass doors and stopped. He didn't knock. He didn't try the handle. He just pressed his face against the glass. I was standing behind the counter, maybe 15 feet away from him. I could hear his breathing through the glass. No, that was impossible, but I could feel it. He raised a hand and placed it on the glass. His fingers were pale, long, and spindly. "I'm calling the cops," I shouted, holding up my cell phone so he could see it. The smile didn't change. He didn't blink. His breath was fogging up the glass in front of his face. I dialed 911. "I'm at the Shell-Off exit 44. There's a man trying to get in. He's acting erratic. I think he's on something." "Officers are on the way," the dispatcher said. "Is the door locked?" "Yes." "Stay on the line with me. Where is he now?" I looked up. "He's at the front door. He's just staring at me." I looked down at the phone for 1 second to check the time. 2:45 a.m. When I looked back up, the door was empty. My stomach dropped. I looked at the monitors. Camera 1, front door, empty. Camera 2, pumps, empty. Camera 3, side alley, empty. "He's gone," I whispered. "Stay inside," the dispatcher said. I scanned the parking lot. Nothing, just the rain. Then I heard it. A tapping sound. It wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from the window right behind my head, the drive-through window. I spun around so fast I almost tripped over my own feet. The yellow raincoat. He was there, pressed against the drive-through glass, which was not bulletproof like the front door. It was just a sliding pane of glass. And he wasn't smiling anymore. His mouth was open in a silent scream. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and focused directly on my throat. He raised a fist and slammed it against the glass. The glass shook. He slammed it again. "He's at the back window!" I screamed into the phone. "He's breaking it!" He hit it a third time. A crack appeared in the center of the pane. I scrambled backward, grabbing a stapler from the counter, the only weapon I had. I retreated into the back office and slammed the steel door shut, locking the deadbolt. I pushed the heavy metal desk in front of it and huddled in the corner. I could hear the glass shatter in the main room. I heard the wet squeak of boots on the linoleum floor. I held my breath. I heard him walking around the front counter. I heard him stop right outside the office door. The doorknob jiggled, gently at first, then violently. Then silence. I stayed in that corner for 10 minutes, sobbing quietly, until I saw flashing blue lights filter under the crack of the door. When the police cleared the building, they found the drive-through window shattered. They found wet, muddy footprints all over the store. But the man was gone. They checked the CCTV footage. This is the part that made me quit that job the next day. On the playback, you can see him smash the window. You can see him crawl through, cutting his hands on the glass. He walks to the office door and tries the handle, but when he realizes it's locked, he doesn't leave immediately. He turns to camera 4, the one inside the shop, and stares directly into the lens. He raises a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. Then he crawls up. He didn't walk out the front door. He climbed up the shelves of the candy aisle, punched out a ceiling tile, and pulled himself into the crawl space above the store. The police searched the roof and the crawl space. They found a sleeping bag and food wrappers up there. But they never found him. I don't work night shifts anymore. And every time I stop for gas, even during the day, I check the ceiling tiles before I walk inside. That's the thing about working with the public. You never know who is going to walk through the door. But sometimes, the scariest shifts are the ones where there is no public at all, where you are completely, utterly alone. Or at least, you think you are. Story 2. The fourth floor. I've been a security guard for 6 years. I've worked at malls, hospitals, and construction sites. Usually, it's the easiest money you can make. You walk a few rounds, scan some RFID tags to prove you did your job, and spend the rest of the night playing games on your phone. 2 years ago, I was contracted to a high-rise corporate building in downtown Chicago. It was a 40-story glass tower. During the day, it was buzzing with thousands of people in suits. But at night, it was a tomb. My job was the roving patrol. I had to take the service elevator up to the 40th floor and work my way down, checking the fire exits and server rooms on every 5th floor. The building was fully renovated, modern and clean, except for the 4th floor. The 4th floor had been gutted for remodeling about 3 months prior. The construction crew had torn out the cubicles, the carpet, and the ceiling tiles. It was just a concrete skeleton filled with drywall dust, stacks of metal pipes, and those hanging plastic tarps that sway when the air conditioning kicks on. We were told explicitly, don't go to the 4th floor unless the fire alarm triggers. It was a liability hazard, so for 3 months, I ignored the 4th floor. It started on a Thursday. I was sitting at the front desk in the lobby, watching the monitors. It was 3 a.m. The main elevator bank had 6 cars. They were all smart elevators, the kind where you type in your floor number on a keypad outside, and it tells you which car to get in. At night, they automatically parked on the ground floor. I was eating a sandwich when I heard a chime. I looked up. Elevator 3 was moving. I watched the digital display above the doors. 1, 2, 3, 4. It stopped at 4. The doors opened. I stared at the monitor covering the 4th floor elevator lobby. It was dark up there, lit only by the red glow of the exit signs. I could see the elevator doors slide open on the screen. No one got out. No one got in. After 30 seconds, the doors closed and the elevator came back down to the lobby. Glitch, I thought. Wiring issue. I went back to my sandwich. 20 minutes later, another chime. Elevator 3 again. Going up. It stopped at 4 again. Doors opened. Sat there for 30 seconds. Came back down. This happened 4 times in an hour. Now, I'm not a brave guy, but I am annoyed easily. The chiming was driving me crazy. I figured some construction worker had left a piece of equipment leaning against the call button up there, or maybe dust had got into the sensor. I grabbed my flashlight and my master key card. I'm going to fix that damn button, I muttered. I stepped into elevator 3 and swiped my card to override the lockout. I pressed 4. The ride up was smooth. When the doors opened, I was hit by the smell of wet concrete and stale dust. The 4th floor was pitch black, except for the beam of my flashlight. The silence was heavy. You know that kind of silence that feels like pressure in your ears? It was like that. I stepped out into the elevator lobby. The call button panel was on the wall to my right. I shined my light on it. It was clean, no dust, no debris leaning against it. Weird, I said aloud. My voice echoed down the empty concrete hallway. I turned to go back into the elevator, but then I froze. To my left, leading away from the elevators, was a long corridor draped in plastic sheeting. The sheets were taped from the ceiling to the floor to separate the zones. From behind the plastic, deep in the darkness of the construction zone, I heard a sound. It sounded like a heavy work boot dragging across the gritty concrete floor. I tightened my grip on the flashlight. "Security," I yelled. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, again, the dragging sound, followed by a step. Someone was walking, slowly, deliberately. "Listen, if you're a squatter, you need to leave. Police are on the way," I lied. I stood there listening. The footsteps stopped. I should have left. I should have got back in the elevator and called the actual cops. But my adrenaline was up, and I convinced myself it was probably some teenager who snuck in to tag the walls with graffiti. I walked toward the plastic sheeting. There was a slit cut in the middle for workers to pass through. I pushed the plastic aside and stepped through. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dust motes dancing in the air. The room was massive, an open-plan office stripped to the bone. Exposed wires hung from the ceiling like vines. I scanned the room. "Come out!" My light caught something on the floor about 20 feet away. Footprints, but not dusty boot prints. These were wet, dark, wet stains on the gray concrete. I walked over to them. They were bare feet, human, bare footprints, wet, in a building that had been locked down for 6 hours, and they were leading away from where I was standing, deeper into the shadows, toward the far corner of the floor where the executive offices used to be. I followed them. My heart was thumping so hard I could feel it in my throat. The prints led to a single, half-demolished wall in the corner. Behind that wall was a dead end, just a small alcove where the copier machine used to sit. I crept forward, rounding the corner, ready to fight. "I see you!" I shouted, rounding the wall. Empty. The alcove was empty. The footprints just stopped. They walked right into the corner and vanished. There was no vent, no door, no window, just solid drywall. I spun around, scanning the room behind me. Nothing. Then, the air shifted. The plastic sheeting I had walked through, about 50 feet away, billowed out as if a draft had hit it, or as if someone had just walked through it. And then, the sound changed. It was a giggle, a high-pitched, childish giggle. It echoed from above me. I jerked my flashlight up to the ceiling. There were no tiles, just ducts and pipes. Hanging from one of the HVAC pipes, directly above my head, was a hand, pale, gray, long fingers gripping the metal pipe. I didn't wait to see the rest of the body. I ran. I sprinted back toward the elevators, tearing through the plastic sheets. I didn't look back. I slammed my hand into the elevator call button. The doors opened immediately. Thank God. I scrambled inside and mashed the lobby button. As the doors were sliding shut, I looked out into the dark hallway one last time. The plastic sheeting was moving. It was parting, and standing there, just at the edge of the darkness, was a figure. It looked like a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, but it was wearing a suit. A full, adult-sized business suit that hung off its tiny frame like a majestic robe. It waved at me. The doors slammed shut. I rode the elevator down, hyperventilating. When I got to the lobby, I packed my bag. I called my supervisor and told him I quit. I didn't care about the 2 weeks' notice. But here is the part that still keeps me up at night. A few days later, I had to go back during the day to return my uniform and pick up my final check. I asked the day shift guard, an old guy named Miller, if they ever found anything on the 4th floor. He looked at me weird. "No, why?" "I saw someone up there," I said. "A kid." Miller's face went pale. He leaned in close. "You know what that building was before they renovated it in the 90s? He asked. I shook my head. "It was an orphanage," he said. "And the 4th floor, that was the infirmary. They say a lot of kids didn't make it out of there during the fire of 1952. I froze. "But that's not the weirdest part," Miller said, pulling up a log on the security computer. "I checked the elevator logs from your shift. I saw that you went up to the 4th floor at 3:20 a.m. "Yeah," I said. "Well," Miller pointed at the screen. "Look at the timestamp for 3:25 a.m. when you came back down." I looked at the log. It registered the elevator going from floor 4 to lobby. But under weight load, it didn't register 180 pounds for one adult male. It registered 240 pounds. Something had ridden down in that elevator with me. Something heavy, and I never saw it. I never felt it. But it was there, standing right next to me in that metal box. I walked out of that building and I have never, ever gone back to a high-rise since. Part 3. Story 3. Room 302. Transition. We assume that when we lock our doors at night, we are keeping things out. But in my line of work, you learn very quickly that locks don't just keep people out. Sometimes they keep things in. We assume that when we lock our doors at night, we are keeping things out. But in my line of work, you learn very quickly that locks don't just keep people out. Sometimes they keep things in. Story 3. Room 302. I work as a night auditor for a mid-range hotel chain. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a fancy term for guy who runs the front desk while everyone else is asleep. It's usually a peaceful job. You run the financial reports, organize the receipts for the morning shift, and drink bad coffee. The hotel I work at is an older building, built in the 1920s. It has that old-world charm, high ceilings, crown molding, and a lobby that smells faintly of lemon polish and dust. It was a Tuesday night in February. The hotel was at maybe 15% occupancy. Dead quiet. At 3:12 a.m. the lobby phone rang. It was a sharp, piercing sound in the silence. I picked it up. The display said, Room 302. Front desk, this is Mike, I said. For a few seconds, there was just static. Then, a woman's voice. She sounded older, frail, and she was whispering. There is someone in the hallway, she said. They are scratching at my door. I apologize, ma'am, I said, pulling up the guest registry on my computer. Let me check the cameras and send someone up. What is your name? Just please, she whispered, her voice trembling. Make them stop. The line went dead. I looked at the computer screen to log the complaint. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I stopped. Room 302 was marked gray, vacant, out of order. Room 302 hadn't been rented in 3 weeks because of a plumbing leak in the bathroom. The water had been shut off and the room was stripped of linens. I frowned. Must be a glitch, I thought. Maybe the system didn't update. I checked the call log. The call definitely came from the extension in room 302. I grabbed the master key card and the security flashlight. I wasn't scared at this point, just annoyed. I figured maybe a homeless person had snuck in through a fire exit and was crashing in the empty room. It happens more often than you'd think. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor always gave me the creeps. The hallway is incredibly long, and the carpet has this dizzying floral pattern that looks like something from The Shining. The lights are on motion sensors, so as you walk, they flicker on ahead of you, leaving darkness behind you. I walked down the hall. It was silent. No scratching sounds, no people. I reached room 302. I stood outside the door and listened. Nothing. Hello? Front desk, I announced loudly. I'm coming in. I tapped my master key against the lock. The light turned green. The mechanism clicked. I pushed the handle down and shoved the door open. Or, I tried to. The door opened about 3 inches and then hit something hard. I peered through the crack. The security latch, that metal swing arm chain at the top of the door, was engaged. My blood ran cold. You can only engage that latch from the inside. Ma'am? I called out through the crack. This is security. You need to open the door. No answer, but I could smell something. It wasn't the smell of an old hotel room. It smelled like wet earth, like potting soil and rain. If you don't open the door, I'm going to have to cut the chain, I warned. Still silence. I shined my flashlight through the crack. The beam cut through the darkness of the room. I could see the bed. It was just a bare mattress, no sheets. I could see the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar. Then, I saw the shadow. Under the bathroom door, a shadow was moving. It was blocking the light from the small bathroom window. I see you in there, I yelled. Suddenly, the phone on the bedside table inside the room lit up. It was ringing. My radio on my hip beeped. It was the front desk phone, forwarding to my walkie-talkie. I grabbed my radio. "This is Mike." "Mike?" It was the automated system. "Incoming call from room 302. I froze. I was standing outside room 302. I was staring at the phone inside room 302. It was ringing, but no one was picking it up. "Hello?" I said into the radio. Through the static of the radio, I heard that same old woman's voice. But this time, she wasn't whispering. She was screaming. "He's in here with me! Help me! He's in the bathroom!" I looked through the crack in the door. The bathroom door slammed shut with violent force. I jumped back. "I'm coming in!" I shouted. I threw my shoulder against the door. The chain held. I backed up and kicked it, right near the lock. The screws tore out of the wood and the door swung open. I ran inside, flashlight raised. "Where are you?" The room was empty. The phone on the bedside table had stopped ringing. I slowly approached the bathroom door. My heart was hammering so hard my vision was blurring. I reached out, turned the knob, and kicked the door open. Empty. Just a toilet, a sink, and a bathtub. The plumbing was disassembled, pipes exposed. No woman, no intruder. I checked the window. It was painted shut. There was no way out. I checked the closet. Empty. Under the bed. Empty. I was standing in the middle of the room, panting, trying to make sense of it. The chain had been locked from the inside. I had heard the voice. Then, the phone on the bedside table rang again. I stared at it. It seemed to vibrate on the wood. I reached out with a shaking hand and picked up the receiver. "Hello," I whispered. "Mike," the voice said. It wasn't the old woman anymore. It was a man's voice, deep, guttural, wet. "You should have knocked louder," the voice rasped. "We were waiting for you." I slammed the phone down and bolted. I didn't even close the door. I ran to the elevator, mashed the button, and practically fell into the lobby. I called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived 10 minutes later. We went back up to room 302. The door was standing open, exactly how I left it. The broken chain was dangling from the frame. They searched the room. They found nothing, no fingerprints, other than mine, no signs of forced entry. But when one of the officers went into the bathroom, he called me over. "You said this room hasn't been used in 3 weeks?" he asked. "Yeah, plumbing issue." He pointed to the bathtub. In the layer of dust that coated the bottom of the tub, someone had written words with their finger. The writing was fresh. "I can see you, Mike." And right next to the words was a single, muddy footprint. It wasn't a human footprint. It looked like a hoof, but it had toes, long, separated toes. I showed the officers the call log on the computer to prove the calls came from the room. They believed me, but there was nothing they could do. "Probably a prank," they said. "Someone with a master key." But that doesn't explain the chain, and it doesn't explain the voice. I didn't quit that night. I needed the money. But I made a new rule for myself. I requested a transfer to the day shift, and whenever I have to walk past the 3rd floor, I keep my head down, because sometimes, when the hotel is quiet and I'm walking past room 302, I can hear it, not scratching. I hear the sound of the chain sliding into the lock, and I hear that old woman giggling. Hotels and office buildings are scary because they used to be full of people. But there are places designed for machines, not humans. Places where the sheer size of the room makes you feel like an ant. And in those massive concrete boxes, echoes can travel a long, long way. Story 4. The Whistling in Aisle 9. I spent a summer working at a massive distribution center for a major online retailer. I won't say the specific company name, but I think you can guess. It involves 2-day shipping and a smiley face logo. The warehouse was a monstrosity. It was the size of 12 football fields stitched together. It was essentially an endless grid of metal shelving that went up 30 feet high, creating these deep, dark canyons of cardboard boxes. I was a picker. My job was simple but mind-numbing. I had to push a plastic cart around, look at a handheld scanner, go to a specific bin location, and grab an item. Rinse and repeat for 10 hours a night. I usually worked the twilight shift, which ended at 4 a.m. The first half of the shift was fine because there were forklifts driving around and people talking. But by 3 a.m., the floor was basically a ghost town. Most of the other pickers were sent to different zones, or they went home early. You could go hours without seeing another human being face to face. It was a Friday morning, around 3:30 a.m. I was assigned to Zone C. Zone C was the furthest corner of the warehouse. It was the section for oversized items, mostly kayaks, heavy tires, and patio furniture. Because the items were so big, the aisles were wider and longer than the rest of the building. It was dead silent back there. The only sound was the low, distant hum of the conveyor belts a mile away and the squeak of my own boots on the polished concrete. I stopped at a bin to pick up a large box of garden tools. I aimed my scanner at the barcode and pulled the trigger. The scanner let out a loud, sharp tone that echoed in the silence. As the echo faded away, I heard something else. It was a whistle. It wasn't a mechanical noise. It was a human whistle. It was a jaunty, happy little tune, like the kind someone would make while walking their dog on a sunny day. It sounded like it came from the next aisle over, aisle 8. I paused, holding the box. I assumed it was Dave, the only other guy who usually worked in Zone C. "Hey," I called out, my voice cracking a little in the dry air. "You got a spare scanner battery? Mine is hitting the red zone." The whistling stopped immediately. I waited for a response. Usually Dave would yell back a joke or tell me to come get it. But there was nothing. Just that heavy, oppressive silence. "Dave?" I asked again. I walked to the end of my aisle and peered around the corner into aisle 8. It was empty, just 2 long rows of cardboard boxes stretching down into the gloom. The motion sensor lights at the far end of aisle 8 were off, which meant no one had walked down there in at least 5 minutes. "Whatever," I muttered to myself. I figured the acoustics in the warehouse were just playing tricks on me. Sound carries weirdly in big metal boxes. I went back to my cart in aisle 9. I pushed it down to the next bin location. I grabbed a set of lawn chairs, scanned the barcode, and put them on the cart. The scanner beeped again. And immediately, like an echo, the whistle answered. It was just one sharp note this time. Exactly the same pitch as my scanner beep. It was mocking me. I froze, my hand gripping the handle of the cart. I looked up at the top of the shelves, 30 feet above me. "Very funny, Dave," I said, trying to sound annoyed rather than scared. "Come on out." I waited. Silence. I decided to test it. I didn't scan anything. I just puckered my lips and let out a short, low whistle of my own. From the darkness at the far end of the aisle, the answer came back. It was closer this time. It wasn't coming from aisle 8 anymore. It was coming from the other end of my aisle, aisle 9. I spun around to face the dark end of the row. The aisle was about 100 yards long. At the far end, the lights were off, leaving it in total shadow. But as I watched, the motion sensor at the very end triggered. The first overhead light flickered on, then the next one, then the next. Something was walking down the aisle toward me, but I couldn't see anyone. The lights were turning on, tracking movement, popping on one by one in a rhythmic sequence, but the aisle appeared completely empty. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Was it a rat? A bird? No, the sensors were set for human-sized objects. The lights were racing toward me. I felt a wave of cold panic wash over me. I abandoned my cart right there in the middle of the aisle. I turned and ran toward the main thoroughfare. I sprinted out of aisle 9 and turned left, heading toward the break room, which was a good 5-minute walk away. I didn't hear footsteps chasing me. I heard sliding. It sounded like heavy fabric dragging across the concrete floor. I risked a glance over my shoulder as I turned the corner. Emerging from aisle 9 was a shape. It stopped under the bright safety light of the intersection. It looked like a person, but it was wrong. It was wearing the standard orange, high-visibility safety vest that we all wore. But the vest was seemingly empty. It was crumpled on the floor, inflating and deflating like a lung. And sticking out of the neck hole of the vest was a head. But it wasn't a face. It was just smooth, pale skin. No eyes, no nose, no ears. Just a mouth. A small, round, puckered mouth. It let out a high-pitched, piercing whistle that made my teeth ache. I didn't look back again. I ran faster than I have ever run in my life. I burst through the double doors of the break room, gasping for air, startling the 2 guys who were sleeping at the tables. "Call security!" I screamed, slamming the door and backing up against it. "There is someone on the floor, in Zone C!" They looked at me like I was having a mental breakdown, but they saw the terror in my face, so they grabbed the radio and called it in. Security did a full sweep of the building. 3 guards went to Zone C with flashlights. They found my cart overturned. They found the lawn chairs scattered everywhere. And they found something else. In the layer of industrial dust on the concrete floor, right where I had been standing when I heard the first whistle, someone, or something, had drawn a picture. It was a smiley face. But instead of the signature arrow smile that the company uses, it was just a round, open circle, a whistling mouth. I didn't go back to Zone C to finish my shift. In fact, I clocked out that morning and I never went back. I left my final paycheck there. I didn't care. I work in a small office now with lots of people and lots of lights. But sometimes when I'm in a grocery store or a library and I hear someone whistling a tune, my hands start to shake and I have to leave immediately because I know it's probably just a person. But I also know that things hide in the echoes of those big, empty places. And sometimes, if you make a sound, they whistle back. And that brings us to the end of our shift. We have survived the gas station stalker, the invisible wait on the elevator, the chained door of room 302, and the whistler in the warehouse. Now, I have a question for you. If you were forced to work one of these jobs alone tonight, which one would you choose? Would you take your chances at the isolated gas station, or would you risk the massive dark warehouse? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed these stories and want to survive the night with us again, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. We upload new nightmares every week. Until next time, stay safe and check your locks.